David Richardson never paid attention to the night cleaning crew until he found a Harvard MBA diploma in the trash can of his own office. What he discovered next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The 42nd floor of Richardson Industries Tower was silent at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in November. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, but David Richardson barely noticed the view as he sat hunched over his mahogany desk, reviewing quarterly reports that would determine the fate of 15,000 employees across 3 continents. At 38, David had built Richardson Industries into a $2.3 billion empire, but success had come at a price that he was only beginning to understand. His marriage had ended 2 years earlier when his wife finally gave up competing with his 80-hour work weeks. His relationship with his teenage son consisted mainly of expensive gifts and awkward weekend visits. The executive floor of his building had become both his kingdom and his prison. As CEO of one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in North America, David had everything money could buy. But he was discovering that wealth couldn't purchase the one thing he desperately needed: genuine human connection. The people around him were either employees who depended on him for their livelihoods or wealthy peers who saw him as competition. Real friendship had become an impossible luxury in his world of power suits and boardroom battles. Tonight was different from his usual late sessions. David had decided to stay past midnight to personally review the performance data of every department head, something he hadn't done in years. As he reached for his coffee cup, his elbow knocked over the small wastebasket beside his desk, spilling its contents across the Persian rug. Cursing under his breath, David knelt to collect the scattered papers. Most were routine: old meeting notes, discarded drafts of presentations, empty coffee cups. But as he gathered the debris, his hand touched something that made him freeze. It was a diploma. Not just any diploma, but a Master of Business Administration degree from Harvard Business School, one of the most prestigious educational credentials in the world. The document was slightly crumpled, but otherwise pristine, as if it had been carefully preserved for years before being thrown away. The name on the diploma read, Maria Elena Santos. David stared at the document in confusion. He knew every executive, manager, and senior employee in his company. There was no Maria Santos in any leadership position at Richardson Industries. So why was a Harvard MBA diploma in his office trash can? As he examined the diploma more closely, David noticed the graduation date, May 15, 2018. This was recent, barely 4 years old. Someone had earned this prestigious degree and then thrown it away? The implications began to dawn on him slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The night cleaning crew. David had seen them occasionally during his late nights at the office, moving quietly through the halls like ghosts in navy blue uniforms. They were invisible to him, part of the background infrastructure that kept his world functioning smoothly. He had never spoken to any of them, never even made eye contact. They were simply there, and then they were gone, leaving behind spotless offices and empty trash cans. But one of them was Maria Santos. One of them had an MBA from Harvard. The realization hit David like a physical blow. For years, he'd been walking past, talking over, and completely ignoring someone who was arguably more qualified than half his executive team. Someone who had achieved one of the most difficult educational accomplishments in business was emptying his trash cans and scrubbing his floors. David's hands trembled as he held the diploma. Questions flooded his mind. How had Maria Santos gone from Harvard Business School to cleaning offices? What circumstances had led to such a dramatic fall? And most importantly, how many times had he looked right through her without seeing her? The next morning, David did something unprecedented. Instead of leaving the building at his usual 6 a.m., he stayed until 7:30, waiting for the night cleaning crew to finish their shift. He positioned himself in the lobby, watching as a small group of uniformed workers made their way toward the employee exit. There were 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women, all appearing tired after their night's work. David studied each face, trying to imagine which one belonged to Maria Santos. One of the women caught his attention. She was probably in her early 30s, with intelligent eyes and posture that suggested education and refinement, despite her humble work clothes. "Excuse me," David called out, his voice echoing in the marble lobby. The group stopped, looking surprised and slightly alarmed to be addressed by someone in an expensive suit at this hour. "Is one of you Maria Santos?" David asked, holding the diploma behind his back. The woman he had noticed stepped forward slightly, her chin raised with quiet dignity. "I'm Maria Santos," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent but clearly articulated. "Is there a problem with my work?" David felt his world shift as he looked into her eyes. This was the woman who cleaned his office every night. This was the Harvard MBA graduate who had been invisible to him for years. "No," David said softly. "No problem with your work. But I found something that belongs to you." He brought the diploma forward, and Maria's face went pale. Her hand flew to her chest as if she had been shot, and for a moment David thought she might faint. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In my office trash can," David replied gently. "You threw it away." The other cleaning crew members looked confused, but Maria's co-workers seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. One of the men put a protective hand on Maria's shoulder. "I can explain," Maria said, her voice barely audible. "I think you should," David replied, "but not here. Could you meet me in my office this afternoon? Say, 8 p.m. Maria nodded, still staring at the diploma in David's hands as if it were a ghost from her past. That afternoon, Maria Santos sat across from David Richardson in the same office she had cleaned hundreds of times. But now she was sitting in the leather chair reserved for visiting executives, wearing her best clothes, a simple but professional outfit she had bought years ago for job interviews that never led anywhere. "Tell me your story," David said simply. Maria took a deep breath, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "I graduated from Harvard Business School 4 years ago with honors," she began, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. "I had job offers from 3 major consulting firms, including Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and Company." David nodded, impressed despite himself. Those were among the most competitive positions in the business world. "But 3 weeks before I was supposed to start at Goldman Sachs, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer," Maria continued. "She was a single parent who had raised me alone, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. She had no insurance, no savings, and no one else to take care of her." David felt something tighten in his chest. He was beginning to understand where this story was heading. "I deferred my job offer for 6 months to take care of her," Maria said. "But 6 months became a year, and a year became 2 years. The medical bills were crushing. Experimental treatments, home care, medications that cost thousands of dollars per month. I sold everything I owned, maxed out every credit card, took out loans against my future earnings." "And your mother?" David asked gently. "She died 14 months after her diagnosis," Maria said, her voice catching slightly. "But by then, I had missed so many job opportunities that the firms had moved on. My student loans were in default because I had used every penny to pay for her care. I was $180,000 in debt with no job prospects and a 3-year gap in my employment history that I couldn't explain without sounding like I was making excuses." David sat in stunned silence. The woman across from him had made a choice that demonstrated more character and integrity than any business decision he had ever witnessed, and it had cost her everything. "I applied for hundreds of positions," Maria continued, "but employers saw the debt, the employment gap, and the fact that I was now a single mother to my 8-year-old son. My mother had been raising him while I was at Harvard. They saw liability, not potential." "Your son?" David asked. "Miguel. He's 12 now. Brilliant kid, straight A's, wants to be an engineer. But we've been living in a studio apartment in Queens, and I've been working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at a grocery store in the early morning, and tutoring high school students online when I can find the time." David felt physically sick. This woman, who should have been running a division of a major corporation, was working herself to death in jobs that didn't begin to utilize her talents or education. "Why did you throw away the diploma?" he asked, Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Because it felt like a mockery. Every night I'd come home exhausted and see it hanging on the wall, reminding me of what I could have been. Miguel would ask why Mommy went to such a famous school but still had to clean toilets for a living. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of wasted potential and societal injustice. David realized that his company, his success, had been built partly on the backs of people like Maria, whose circumstances had forced them into roles far beneath their capabilities. "Maria," David said finally, "I want to offer you a position." "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need charity." "This isn't charity," David interrupted. "This is business. I need a director of strategic development, someone who can analyze our operations and identify areas for improvement. The position starts at $140,000 per year, plus benefits and profit sharing." Maria stared at him in shock. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," David replied, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" "You have to promise me that you'll never throw away that diploma again. You earned it. You deserve to display it proudly." Maria began to cry, not the quiet tears she had been fighting, but full, overwhelming sobs that seemed to release years of suppressed hope and frustration. "Why?" she managed to ask through her tears. "Why are you doing this?" David was quiet for a long moment, processing his own emotions. "Because for 4 years, I've been walking past you every night without seeing you. Because you represent everything I claim to value in business: intelligence, dedication, sacrifice, but I was too blind to recognize it. And because I have a son too, and I'd want someone to give him a chance if he ever needed one." He paused, his voice growing softer. "But mostly because you've already proven that you're willing to give up everything for the people you love. That kind of character can't be taught in any business school, not even Harvard." 6 months later, Maria Santos sat in her corner office on the 38th floor of Richardson Industries Tower, reviewing a strategic plan that would revolutionize the company's approach to employee development. Her Harvard diploma hung proudly on the wall behind her desk, no longer a source of pain, but a symbol of perseverance and hard-won achievement. Miguel, now thriving in an excellent private school, often stopped by the office after classes to do his homework in the employee lounge, where he had become a favorite among the staff. His presence served as a daily reminder to everyone who met him of what was at stake when companies made decisions about work-life balance and employee support. The transformation in Maria's life had been dramatic, but the changes she had brought to Richardson Industries were equally profound. Her strategic initiatives had improved employee retention by 34%, increased productivity across all divisions, and saved the company over $50 million in operational costs during her first year. More importantly, Maria had convinced David to implement a program she called Second Chance Hiring, actively recruiting qualified candidates who had employment gaps due to family obligations, health issues, or other life circumstances. The program had identified dozens of talented individuals who had been overlooked by traditional hiring practices. "The best part about Maria's story," David told a conference of business leaders, "isn't that we found hidden talent in our cleaning crew. It's that we learned to look for hidden talent everywhere. Some of our most innovative ideas now come from people who stock our supply closets, answer our phones, and deliver our mail, people we used to treat as invisible." The speech, which was recorded and posted online, went viral within 48 hours. Richardson Industries received thousands of applications from overqualified candidates who had been stuck in survival jobs, and the company's reputation as an employer of choice skyrocketed. But perhaps the most significant change was in David himself. He began arriving at the office earlier to greet the night cleaning crew as they finished their shifts. He learned their names, asked about their families, and discovered that several had impressive educational backgrounds and career aspirations that didn't match their current positions. "You know what I realized?" David said to Maria one evening as they worked late on a presentation for the board of directors. I spent years thinking I was successful because I'd climbed to the top of the corporate ladder. But real success isn't about how high you climb. It's about how many people you help climb with you. Maria smiled, looking out at the Manhattan skyline that had once seemed like an impossible dream. My mother used to say that education isn't about the degree you earn. It's about what you do with the knowledge you gain. I spent 4 years thinking my education had been wasted because I couldn't use it in the way I had planned. And now? David asked. Now I realize that everything I learned about sacrifice, about perseverance, about putting family first, was just as valuable as anything I studied at Harvard, maybe even more valuable. 2 years after David found the diploma in his trash can, Richardson Industries had become a case study in progressive hiring practices at business schools across the country. The company's Invisible Talent Initiative had been replicated by hundreds of other firms, creating opportunities for thousands of overlooked workers. Maria had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Strategic Development, making her one of the highest-ranking executives in the company. She had also completed a book about her experiences titled From Harvard to the Night Shift, a story of hidden potential in plain sight, which became a bestseller and sparked a national conversation about employment discrimination and second chances. Miguel, now 14, was thriving academically and had already expressed interest in following his mother's path to Harvard Business School. But more importantly, he had grown up watching his mother transform not just her own life, but the lives of countless others who had been overlooked and undervalued. The most important lesson I want Miguel to learn, Maria explained during a television interview, isn't that you should never give up on your dreams. It's that sometimes life forces you to take a detour, and that detour can lead to something even more meaningful than what you originally planned. The interviewer asked the question that everyone wanted to know. Do you ever regret the choices you made? Giving up that job at Goldman Sachs to care for your mother? Maria's answer was immediate and unequivocal. Never. Not for a single moment. That choice taught me that success isn't measured by your salary or your title. It's measured by your willingness to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. She paused, her voice growing stronger. Besides, if I had taken that job at Goldman Sachs, I would have become just another Harvard MBA in a sea of Harvard MBAs. Instead, I became something much rarer, someone who learned that true leadership means seeing potential where others see problems, finding solutions where others see obstacles, and creating opportunities where others see dead ends. David, who was also present for the interview, added his own perspective. Maria didn't just change our company, she changed how I see the world. Before I found that diploma, I thought success was about surrounding yourself with the most impressive credentials and the highest achievers. Now I understand that success is about recognizing that impressive credentials and high achievement can be found in the most unexpected places. The story of Maria Santos became more than just a tale of personal redemption. It became a symbol of the hidden potential that exists in every workplace, every community, and every person whose circumstances don't reflect their capabilities. Companies across the globe began implementing diploma audits, systematic reviews of their employees' educational backgrounds to identify overqualified workers who could be promoted or retrained for positions that better match their skills. Labor advocacy groups used Maria's story to push for legislation protecting workers who had employment gaps due to caregiving responsibilities. But perhaps the most powerful impact was on individual managers and executives who began to truly see their employees, all of their employees, as complete human beings with stories, dreams, and potential that went far beyond their current job descriptions. The night I found that diploma in my trash can, David reflected years later, I thought I was discovering something about Maria. But what I really discovered was something about myself, that I had been blind to the extraordinary people who were right in front of me every single day. Maria's journey from Harvard Business School to the night cleaning crew to the executive suite proved that talent doesn't always wear a suit and tie. Sometimes it wears a uniform and works the night shift. Sometimes it's invisible until someone cares enough to really look. But most importantly, her story demonstrated that second chances aren't just gifts we give to others. They're opportunities we create for ourselves to become the kind of people who see potential instead of problems, who build bridges instead of barriers, and who understand that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you help others achieve. The diploma that Maria had thrown away in despair became a symbol of hope for millions of people who had been overlooked, undervalued, and written off. It proved that your current circumstances don't define your worth, that setbacks don't have to be permanent, and that sometimes the most qualified person for the job is the one you never thought to consider. And for David Richardson, finding that diploma became the moment he learned the most important business lesson of his career. The greatest untapped resource in any organization isn't technology or capital. It's the human potential that's hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the wisdom to recognize it and the courage to act on that recognition. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are Maria Santos working all around us, people whose current jobs don't reflect their education, their dreams, or their potential. The most valuable discovery you can make isn't in a boardroom or a laboratory. It's in the willingness to see every person you encounter as someone whose story might surprise you, whose talents might amaze you, and whose potential might change everything. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.